All right, everyone, welcome back to EMBody Radio, the premier podcast for high-performing humans looking to develop their unique formula for becoming their happiest, healthiest, highest selves. Today, we have on, everybody's a special guest, but we have a super special guest on. We have Zac Efron's doppelganger on the show today. Three-time repeat guest on the show, which is even more special than being Zac Efron's doppelganger because we don't have very many three-peat guests on here. I think you and Joe might be the only three-peat guests on the show. But today we are here with my very good friend, Mr. Chase Chewning. Chase, welcome back to EMBody Radio. We always love having you here. For everybody that is floating around in space, not doing it right, and doesn't know who you are, let them know who you are, what you do, how you got where you are, all that good stuff.
Well, I guess besides being on call for Mr. Efron's hair, facial hair, body double, I don't know. Like, I think we got like the same chin line. I think that's where everybody pulls it from. But hey, I'll take it. Very amazing, talented human being. So these days, it's like when somebody asks me who I am, what I do, I don't know if it's like year 4 going into year 5, LA coming out at me now, but I really just the first word and the first way I want to describe myself is I am expansion. And it has just been an evolution over the years now of who I am, but more specifically what I do and how I do it. The why has pretty much always been solidified, but even that has gotten some fine tuning over the last several years. But the short answer is I'll say I'm a podcaster. I run a health and wellness and personal development show called Foray Radio. And a few years ago was also a health coach, technically still certified and all that. And that's where I got my origin kind of in the space, and the premise of the show and my content these days was a clinical health coach. And so I ran a concierge medical practice. I was their wellness director for many years back east, and did that and realized I was, like a lot of people, getting overworked and undervalued. And that's when this whole internet, social media, podcast thing became more of a thing. This is back in like maybe 2015, 16. And I really leaned into it and decided to make the entrepreneurial jump and go all in on the podcast and started my own online coaching business, and did that for a few years before kind of shutting down Health Coach Chase and just really leaning into heavy podcast Chase. And then even before all that, I was a student, still am. I would say I'm a student of life every day. But I went to grad school for health promotion with a concentration in nutrition, got my undergrad in exercise science. And then before that, I was active duty Army for 6 years. And then way before that, I was just a young little country boy running amok in the mountains of Southwest Virginia, just beating up my siblings and setting things on fire in the woods like, country boys do.
That sounds way better. Can we just go back there? That sounds like way more fun. Setting shit on fire, climbing trees, making stuff out of mud. Like, that sounds... Oh,
yeah.
That's my preference.
Fire forts, mud forts, rock forts, jumping off buildings, chopping down trees. I had a phenomenal childhood, growing up on almost a couple hundred acres, literally in the middle of nowhere in Virginia. And it was just incredible. So, that kind of is a theme throughout my entire life, is just being outdoors, living in community, staying connected to nature and family and people that matter, and just living well. More importantly, living an active life is something that was nature and nurture for me for a long time before it actually became, hey, I'm actually really interested in this kind of stuff. And we, might get into that. I know we touched base on that on our last interview, but that also was a conscious choice because I kind of had that taken away from me due to some significant injuries I sustained while in active duty, that kind of forced me to need to really, really pivot on daily living, daily physical activity, how to just stay well after severe injury. And then it just turned into a passion that I wanted to do for myself for as long as possible, but also be a model and share this experience of what's working and what's not for as many people as possible, which naturally led me and you and a lot of people in this wellness space to, create platforms and maintain platforms to share our journey, but also hopefully educate and empower other people to do the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. We will definitely touch on the back to nature bit. As soon as you said it, I was like, you have found your way back to nature many, many times.
Yeah.
But one thing I want to lead with, because we've known each other through the internet now since like 2017-ish, which fucking crazy, that's 5 years. And in internet years, that's a long time. And in social media years are like dog years. They're like, you're in the middle ages of our relationship now. So like, congrats to us. But one of the biggest things that I've noticed just watching you evolve over the years, and then also becoming more and more friends, colleagues, that kind of thing over the years, is the shift in your energy. And you've always had really wonderful energy. It's always been very warm and loving and all of that. But the way that I think of it now is you're so sparkly. Like you just have, in the best way possible, like you're so, and I don't know if like men love hearing that, but like truly, it's like this effervescence. It's like this joy that's just like pulsating off of you at all times. Like you can see it through your stories, you can see it in your content. You can, like when we were podcasting in Austin together past this spring, like you can just feel it coming off of you. And so have you been consciously aware of that shift? And if yes, what's catalyzed it? Just talk about that.
I guess the short and the long of it is I endured a lot of things in life. Like many people, we go through our upbringing, we go through nature, nurture, we set out on a path of our own choice, whether that's, leaving home for the first time, going to college, for me, joining the military, spending time and getting lost and not knowing what you want to do. We all are on a path, and ultimately that leads us to a point in time, a point in our life, a point on that path when we kind of like finally wake up. And I think over the years, I've had this slow, well, the last 2 years, it's been pretty quick, but up, maybe a couple of years before that, it was this slow unraveling, this slow awakening, and this realization that I was in these just various layers of sleepwalking. And not in a bad way by any means. I think when we all kind of have this first awakening of what do I want from my life? Something in my life looks differently than I thought it would, or my original plan didn't pan out, or you challenge the norm, the status quo, your parents' belief systems, even belief systems you have, or do I even have one? That's what I'm talking about here. That first little aha, when you're like your life, the universe, whatever you're calling is kind of shaking you up a little bit and you're coming to. For me, that happened when I was right around like 35. Wow. And like a lot of people during the pandemic, we began to look at life, I think, in a different way, due to just the nature of what was going on with health concerns and government and society and community. And just, there was a massive pivot globally. And I don't need to go down that rabbit hole again, but it did something so intensely to me and for me that I reached a point to where I just decided to fully surrender, because I was feeling some kind of way. I had had this initial kind of awakening. I'd already been several years in my journey of reading all the personal health books, listening to all the podcasts, doing all the fitness, all the wellness. And so I felt like my physical self, my mental self, my emotional self had all been doing the work. But the last missing component, the last part of my well-being and kind of my personal model was the spiritual self. And like any part of our health and our wellness, I think when we overdo one area, the other area is like this beach ball that's being pushed down underneath the water. And we're working and we're working and we're trying to keep it there. But eventually, due to the forces of nature and our own calling and our own intuition, whatever you want to call it, that's going to begin to rise up. And that's exactly what happened to me. And so the beach ball popped up, the metaphorical existential beach ball popped up. And I was just like, I can't ignore this anymore. And so I jumped in heavily to some unique practices, some unique experiences that were the complete polar opposite of anything and everything I had done or believed in or didn't believe in before. And what I mean by that, quite frankly, is, jumping into psychedelics, jumping into plant medicine, jumping in and even back into significant and consistent mental health help. And even like another layer of that is just, like I said, surrender, opening myself up, literally opening my heart up to people in my life that I knew that I trusted, but there was a wall up, and like that beach ball was banging up against that wall. So it's kind of like an all over the place answer, but it was just this moment in time because the world was so like, what the fuck is going on? I thought up was down, left was right. I was challenged. I was being challenged and forced to stretch and just what I was maybe going to willing to choose as truth, looking in my daily life. And I was just like, this is the last part of my life that is making me feel some kind of way. And if I have an honest kind of moment and just look at it, it's the one that I have not worked on. And me being the person that I'm after all the things, I want to be, I don't even want to say like as balanced as possible, but I want to have practices in all areas of my life that I can acknowledge as like, I'm neglecting it, I'm working on it, or right now there needs to be kind of a give and a play for some other reasons. And then that was like the biggest awakening I've had in years. And I think that, 2 years ago now has been this kind of the glitter, the sparkle, the effervescence you're talking about. And, you're not the first person to tell me this. And especially when I hear it from people, which I receive and I thank you for, you're not the first person to tell me this. And especially through a platform such as, like a podcast or social media, when you're not physically exchanging that energy with that person, when that resonates through the interwebs and hundreds and thousands of miles away, that tells me that a radical change, a powerful change has happened in my life. But more importantly, maybe not more importantly, but secondary to that, it's also extremely validating because this change in my life was not easy. To challenge my norms, to challenge my truths, to jump into the deep end was at the same time the easiest thing I've ever done, but also the hardest thing I've ever done. So it's validating for me in the sense that like, I know what I've been doing has been serving me, but that's me. And I do feel amazing and I'm very happy with life and I'm very content and fulfilled and on a new journey now. But it's, I think everybody enjoys positive feedback. I know that I'm doing my thing and I'm loving my thing, but if other people receive that, then that's the ripple effect that I'm also after, not for just confirmation, validation, compliment kind of thing, but that is going to imprint on other people. And like I said earlier, I'm in the business, I'm in the life of educating and informing others on what is possible in this human experience. And so if just an energetic sensation, whether in person or online, is a part of that, then it's like icing on the cake,
Absolutely. And you said exactly what I was thinking. It's when we do the work for ourselves, obviously that is enough for us as individuals. You're like, I feel good in myself. I feel different. I feel a positive change. But when you have a heart for other people and when you have a heart for helping other people or impacting them positively in some way, when you get that feedback reflected to you, you're like, okay, this work matters beyond just myself. And it's okay to do work on yourself just for yourself. That's fine. But it's a whole nother layer to it when there's a collective effect, which is ultimately what other people receiving your energy differently is. It's like it's a signature, and that signature leaves like a different trail now, and it's like it sparkles now, like, and that's so powerful too, because the last 2 years have been, and going on 3 now, I guess, because it started in 2020. The last 2 to 3 years have been chaotic for everyone, but they've also been, for a lot of people, really big seasons of growth and really big seasons of change in a positive way. And kind of the vibe that I got when you were talking about, 2020, everything was going on and everything outside was wild. And so I just needed to work on me. There's a quote that I forget who said it, but I was listening to a podcast a couple weeks ago and it was like, when you don't know what to work on yourself. And it's like, sometimes we reach for, and there's validity in, oh, maybe I need to like hire a business mentor, or I need to acquire this new skill, or I need to do this thing. And sometimes none of those feel quite right, but you will never make a mistake when you invest in yourself and you work on yourself, which is exactly what you did. And now you're, I don't want to even say on the other side because it's like a continuing journey, but you've kind of crossed a new threshold and you're getting to feel and experience and integrate what all of that is to and for you. And that is so beautiful. And I would love, because you're like, well, psychedelics. I would love to hear about what your like kind of first experience was there, because I'm guessing you didn't just like walk in and be like, I'm going to do like a hero dose of mushrooms right now. Like that's probably not most people's first experience. So kind of like, what was your intro into the psychedelic world?
It's a funny story, but one that I'm coming to realize is not that uncommon. Again, I guess I just kind of going through life with when you have certain belief systems, you'll see what you want to see and you won't see what you want to see, kind of thing. I think. But before I say that, actually, I love how you're kind of hitting on the whole our inability or ability to kind of go inward. And there's this quote that I love from one of our favorite authors, Ryan Holiday, from his book that came out a couple of years ago called Stillness is the Key, that he takes from this other guy named Blaise Pascal. And they say that all humanity's problems stem from men's inability, to sit quietly in a room alone. And I think the last couple of years, that's exactly what the world gave us. It was this, hey, you're going to have to sit alone for a while. And I think despite whatever may or may not have been happening in our outside world, we all were forced to kind of go inward. And the perceived fear of what was going on in the outside world, I think was far greater because many of us were unwilling to sit still with ourselves and to go inward. That, I think, is where the most fearful things, the most fearful parts of our lives, and yet the most important work lies. But we choose to just distance ourselves from ourselves and then just place the fear on the outside world in many cases. So I hope that's not the case for your listeners. And I'm sure that wasn't, because they're a reflection of you and your work. But back to me and jumping into the deep end.
But no, that really quickly, that is a very important point. And there's probably some people that are scared of that and they're listening to people like you or like myself to get the courage to do that. So really quickly, before we'll backtrack a little bit, did you have any of that initial resistance? Was there resistance at all to sitting with yourself? And if so, how did you overcome it initially? Just a quick, for the people out there that might be like, yo, I want to do this, but I'm scared as shit.
I think for me, it was there and I didn't quite fully realize it, because first, like many people, like all of us probably, we had to really pivot and change our day-to-day living. We had to change how we met people, how we ran errands, how we got groceries, but also how we worked. What is safe to do and what is unsafe to do, or what is my perceived level of safety in doing or not doing something that I used to do on a regular basis. And so I think for me, and I don't think this was an excuse, but it's just how it looked. I really, because I do everything in person. I shoot my show in person. I'm always going, meet and greeting people. And that went away for many, many months, especially in LA. We shut down hard. And so I first turned to just all day, all night for many weeks, just trying to figure out how I was going to pivot and what I needed to do differently. And thankfully, technically my world was already online. So it was a choice for me to go from online to in-person, then back to in-person to online. So it wasn't that difficult, but I did recognize that my audience and the people around me, my community, probably had a different situation. So it was more of me trying to change my messaging and the needs, what I felt were the perceived needs of my audience and community, so that I could turn around and survive, but also help others. I needed to align how I was doing it with the mission as well. And so, but then that didn't turn into, drowning myself in work. And that turned into me focusing on the professional self and, working on the external self a lot more still, and letting the inside self slide. And so much so that I reached kind of a breaking point probably a year into the pandemic. It was like early 2021, February, March-ish. And I had my most intense burnout I've ever experienced. My first real burnout. And it was the form of just like days kind of sitting in my office and just staring at the wall, just like depression, severe lack of motivation. Didn't know if anything I was doing mattered. Didn't know if, I was going to be keeping the same clients or same sponsors, or like if even what I was doing interested me anymore. Because if at that point, a year later, if the world was still looking and feeling and acting so differently, does that mean that I need to change my world to fit into it differently now? And so it's just kind of like this existential dilemma of my world, the world, what matters to me. But also I was just ignoring so much of those long days and long nights, and it was physiologically, emotionally catching up to me. And so that was kind of the point, like quite literally after 3 days of just barely pushing the envelope, or, pushing pencils in my office to do the bare minimum. I had to snap out of it. And I just did what I think works well for me in many instances like that. And I would recommend for anybody. And that's just, I had to do an immediate environment change. So my wife and I packed the car, packed an overnight bag, which did a quick overnight trip, like 2 hours north, went up to Santa Barbara, and just like to get out of my office, to get out of my norm, to get out of my perceived immediate world, and just change my environment, get back into nature, get back outdoors, just get back into somewhere different that's going to cause me to have to pay attention. Environmental change is huge for implementing a change state in our minds and our bodies, I think, regardless of whatever we're working up against. And that was like the reset that I needed. And that's exactly what it did for me. It was just like this ultimate recharge from just taking downtime, but then also all of the fun science, amazing things of grounding, of vitamin D, of sunshine, of forest bathing, of quality time with people that matter. Like I knew how I felt and how better I felt during that time. But, me being the health techie guy, I was looking at all my wearables and I was
wow,
like, shit,
look, my Whoop data, so nice.
Yeah, my Whoop, I'm in the green for the first time in like 2 weeks, and I'm literally doing nothing. I'm not training. I'm not focusing on nutrition, but I'm doing nothing of the things that were taxing and stressing me. And now I'm allowing this change, this positive change to happen. So if you can't shake whatever you're trying to shake, get out of that environment. And I promise you, it might not be the answer, but it is an incredible stepping stone.
Absolutely. I could not agree more. Like everything that you said, I've experienced it myself. Even just like, I know you guys drove, but even just the experience of being on an airplane for me, I'm like, wow, I'm removed from all of the thing. And I think it's things that just keep us stuck in that pattern, because burnout, it's a very serious thing. And like, I want to give you a sticker because it's like, hey, welcome to the club. Like every single business person that I know has been there. Like honestly, I think every human that I know has been there. But in some ways, like it becomes a pattern, like those feelings, those behaviors, how you're coping with it, all of that stuff, it becomes very patternistic. Like you said, just like going in my office and just like staring and hoping something is different. And as very routine driven people, which I am, I know you are, I know a lot of the listeners of the show are, like that's a pretty characteristic thing of high performing individuals. But sometimes your routine is your detriment. Sometimes you are so you think that the structure that you've given yourself is going to be what saves you, but instead that's what's keeping you in that pattern loop. So and then you stay in that pattern loop so long that you end up getting to a point in that burnout where you literally just burn the boats. Instead, if we can create some conscious awareness of, okay, let me just remove myself from this for a minute. Let me get myself somewhere different. You don't have to burn the boats, because it's like, okay, I experienced something different. Something in me changed. Maybe it was big and profound. Maybe it was small, but like you said, it's a starting point. And so it's removing yourself from that typical structure and getting into something refreshing, renewing, recharging, just different. Different is good for our brains. And I think it's especially good for our brains as people that are routine oriented, because how can you learn or get differently inspired if you're not doing anything different? So I think that's it. And you're listening to this, you think that sounds too simple to work. I promise you it's not. So like, go do it. Literally book yourself a long weekend, go do it. Don't care where it is. Just get somewhere else. That is like, I honestly need to do that. I'm going to New York in a couple of weeks. Like I'm doing it. Like, and it helps my brain every single time. So truly listen to that advice, because it is fabulous advice. So that is our kind of entry point here. So now rewinding again, back to the psychedelic conversation. First intro to psychedelics. Was this after this experience?
This was maybe a few months later. Yeah. Probably I'd say about 4 or 5 months later. And again, like I said, what I was going through, personally and professionally, we just kind of talked about, but where I live, Los Angeles, California, we really locked down hard. My literal world, when I would walk outside of I was living downtown in a high-rise apartment building at the time, downtown shut down. It literally was like, I am legend. I would walk outside in one of the most densely populated cities in the world, And Emily, I would walk and I would not see another human being. I would not hear another car. But here's what I did see. For a long time, it was like that. And weeks went by, and then riots and protests and people setting things on fire and bashing windows. And so my world then became boarded up walls, boarded up windows. It became like, am I living in LA or Mogadishu somewhere? I was literally walking down the street with armed National Guardsmen and tanks and Humvees on patrol. And it was this whole other duality, this existential crisis, if you will, for me, because I was like, not that many years ago, that was me.
I was going to ask if that was like
one.
triggering it all to like being in the military.
I'm getting goosebumps now talking about it. It was, I've never been in a scenario, except maybe when I was a kid and I would visit my dad on his base. I was a civilian witnessing military life. I've never been, but that's different. That was peacetime, and that was on a base. This was, who knows what the fuck's going to happen. There are armed men and women in uniform, in what we call full battle rattle, your helmet, your Kevlar, your body armor, your side weapon, all these things, on patrol a block across from where I live. And not only is that an eerie sensation for anyone to go through, but especially for me, because I would look at these guys and I would go, that's what that was me. Like, that's what it was like. And it was so weird to be on the other side of the uniform, on the other side of the M16, and processing that. And I think only really now, honestly, until kind of like talking about this out loud, that cracked me open in a really unique way. And that's also something I've really been processing post a lot of these therapy sessions, post a lot of these psychedelic plant medicine sessions, is a lot of other trauma healing. But honestly, for me, I didn't realize how much of this citizen soldier identity ball that I have living inside of me. And so at the time, that was something that was really knocking on my door, knocking on my heart. And so I think that, coupled with the way that the world was going those next several months, it sounds like a joke, but it sounds so LA. I literally walked into, like, it was like this secret party in the hills. And I walked in, and there's a shit ton of people there. I knew a good amount of them, and I immediately assessed the situation, kind of did my scan. Like, you're cool. I know you. What are you doing over there? You're weird.
Yeah, little vibe check.
Little vibe check. But then also, like, I knew things were going down. I knew people were doing things of various substances and like whatever. But then this person that I know, who I trust a lot, just walked up to me, opened his hand, and goes, "Take this." And it felt like, I looked down at his hand, and it was like this little pill. And it felt like eternity, like my life flashed before my eyes. It seemed like my parents were watching me, God was watching me, my entire 35 years up to that point of, do, don't, yes, no, good, bad, evil, good, like hell, heaven, all of these things, all of these dualities of, what are you going to do, Chase? What are you going to do? Because up until this point, you've been the guy that has said, that's wrong, that's illegal, drugs are for degenerates. I snapped back to, and I said, fuck it. I grabbed the pill down the hatch. And then that night, I think in a way was the first time I ever, human to human, like human to a lot of other humans, experienced love that to this day gets me emotional just thinking about. And so I was like, hold up. You mean to tell me, up to this point, the thing that I had been judging, the people that I had been judging, and all these other people in my life that have been telling me, this is wrong, this is evil, this is immoral, this is a sin. If you do this, you're going to lose your job, become a crack whore on the street, become homeless, all of these things. And I was like, there's no way, there is no way this is possible, because love happened. If love is there, and if love is the dominating emotion, and everybody's on the same page about it, and everyone's safe and all these things, I'm like, there's just no way this can be true. So if that's not true, because I've experienced it, then the opposite has to be true. And that is, under the right circumstances, with safe medicine, good intention, good people, really, it's all about set and setting, and a good substance. And I guess I should preface, I'm not condoning the use of illegal substances, but should you
we'll
find
put a
yourself,
disclaimer on the intro.
should you find yourself in this situation, it is first and foremost paramount and okay to assess the situation, to ask these questions of the people and of yourself. And so, I mean, to kind of just wrap that point up, that cracked me wide open. It showed me things in my life where I was so judgmental, and showed me in relationships with people in my life that I really loved and cared about, where I had walls up, and where I was, most importantly, what kind of going down this rabbit hole did for me was, once I talked with others about it, they opened up to me about how much they had been keeping me at bay about their own choice of certain substances and their own choice of certain practices and things in life, and, you know, even modalities of therapy, because they could just tell, like, you know, Chase, I love you, we're homies and stuff, but I could just tell, like, you were feeling some kind of way about this stuff, you know, even judgmental. And like, I that even broke me down, because I was like, wait a minute, hold up. We could have been better friends all along. We could have been deepening our connection even more all along. But because of my own ego, I was keeping this barrier up. Like, what the fuck? Who am I? And so that was just a whole nother bonus to all of this. And so once I realized that love was underneath all of this, it made me so much more curious about, okay, that was like a one-off experience. What if I really intentionally decided to work on something under one of these substances, under even professional help? And so then that began to, I would dive into the literature, the studies, the friends, the recommendation, the hearsay on the streets of things like psilocybin and ketamine. I should say the first thing that experienced at that party was MDMA.
I figured that's what it was. I was like, you get your
it's
little
the heart opener.
cracked open,
Exactly.
and your fabric of reality collapses, and you're like, oh. And it's so funny that you mentioned that about your friend literally like just sticking out his hand and being like, here. My first experience with MDMA was very, very similar. It was literally my friend being like, okay, your life's about to change. And I was like, I had that exact moment where I was like, are we going to do this? Are we going to do this? Are we going to, okay, we're doing it. We're doing it. And then I like ended up in a cuddle puddle on the ground in an all white outfit outside with all of my friends, did not give a shit. Like, but truly, like, when that happens, it's almost like, and I'm sure there's people for whom this is not their experience, and that's still valid. But like, for me, it was like, I'm experiencing myself for the first time. Like, this loving energy feels very natural. And I'm not going to be sad about it yet, but I'm sad that I don't like that I've been cut off from this my whole life. Like, why? Why is that? And yeah, so I think just the seeing yourself for the first time and being like, this is how I'm supposed to be. And not to say that you're supposed to be on MDMA all the time, but to say that I'm supposed to be able to access this level of openness in my life should I want it at any time. How can I work on that? And I think that that's like the underpinning of all of it. And then I could go down the whole rabbit hole of like, oh, why have these things been made illegal and criminalized? And I'm like, well, that's because they don't want you to be happy and loving and ask questions and think creative. Like, that's a whole nother. But I love that. I love that so much. And so then okay, back to conversation. You started getting into psilocybin. You said that was kind of like next breadcrumb.
That was
mine
next
was
for me. Yeah.
Psilocybin was first for me. And I was like, I just did that by myself. Like, I did a full hero journey by myself, which I don't know if that was wise, but I had a great time. It was a great situation.
I've been there once. Yeah, too. That's interesting. Yeah.
I loved it. And then MDMA was the first thing I did, like, in community with people. But okay, psilocybin, how does that go for you? What's kind of this journey now into pursuing and being more curious about psychedelics?
Oh, I do want to highlight something that is, I hope, going to be the through line through all of this. And you just said the word, and that's community. And I'll even add on to that, meaningful and quality relationships. That is ultimately what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about ways that I have prepared myself and I won't say set myself up for failure, but have given myself a lot of extra work and potentially unnecessary steps to develop and nurture meaningful quality relationships in my life with other people, but more specifically, like you were just talking about, kind of opening up ourselves, the feeling of ourself, the self, opening up myself. And on my 35th birthday, I decided to start, I tried psilocybin for the very first time with a group of people that are some of my favorite humans in the world, my like longtime friends back from Virginia and DC. We were out in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. For my birthday every year, I like to my thing's kind of like a remote cabin wilderness getaway.
Love it.
And so we decided to do that. And I'm sitting in a natural hot spring in the middle of the mountains in the woods in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, just staring up at the true awesomeness that is our earth. Mm-hmm. And I look over and I see all my friends and my wife in there. We're like, it's like 8 of us. And I'm just like, again, this is just the most beautiful thing in the world. We're doing nothing, but we are connecting and spending quality time. And my heart was just already so full. And then I took a little chocolate. And so then I was like, ooh, I'm even more full. But again, it was what I experienced was, and I took a pretty small dose because I like the wellness guy in me, the scientist in me is always like, let me explore it. And I had studied it pretty, probably for like several weeks, if not a month, looking at clinical studies, trials, talking to a lot of friends. I wanted to like know what I'm doing. I want to know the potential of things. And so I did a little dose. And then throughout the day, I dosed higher and higher and higher as I was kind of seeing what it was doing for me, like I would do with anything, a new supplement or a new training modality, whatever. And again, it was just this overwhelming sensation of love. And of course, with psilocybin, you get like the sillies, you get like goofy and funny. And
you're just like,
it's just like, exactly. Like we're just tapped into this wonder and awe of childhood that is so beautiful. But again, the through line here is community. And I think what was so important for me in testing the waters with these things was I was in a very safe environment with people that I knew and trusted. Also, it doesn't hurt that a lot of my friends are like medical professionals, doctors, nurse practitioners, anesthesiologists. So everybody's like, if shit goes down, we're good. So, but no matter what you're choosing to embark upon in your life, having that safety of what could happen. Am I covered? Am I somewhere safe? And with someone safe that can, support me, I think is paramount. And again, I had that. And then I was cracked open and the sensation of love again. And just everything was so much more beautiful. I mean, I'm again looking at mountains and trees and blue sparkling water, the effervescence. There we go.
Yes.
And so what I was feeling and what I was viewing was just personified love, wonder, and awe. And just this, again, this connection. They call MDMA, and I think psilocybin even fits into this. There's some debate, as being an entheogen, heart openers, basically. Yeah. But they definitely open up feelings and thoughts and emotions and a lot of things. So like when you're experiencing that, everybody else is great and necessary, but also like for the first time in 35 years, I truly felt Emily chase. I was like, wait a minute. Like it allowed me to shed just so much shame and questions and things that like, I'm like, wait a minute. Why do I believe that? Do I even know why? Was it just imprinted on me? No harm, no foul to like my upbringing, to my church, to my parents, to my family. Like I have nothing but grace and love and awe and thanks for all of them. But ultimately, like, it doesn't really matter. I think if we're walking through life and we're doing things and we don't know why, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but does that not warrant, hey, hold up here, like, why? And for the first time in 35 years, I began to question all of these things and not question like, what is the meaning of life? Like, why am I like this? It wasn't that. It was, it's okay to question.
Right.
It's okay to question.
Yeah. It's just
Yep.
it's acknowledging that there is something to look at to begin with. Because until then, you're kind of walking around, everything in your subconscious, it's running your life, but it's so programmed and it's been around for so long since you were a kid that you don't think to question it until you think
Hmm.
to question it. And I think that's part of the beauty of psychedelics specifically. And there's obviously other routes of getting there, but they almost just kind of in a very gentle way. Like I've never been, at least with MDMA or psilocybin. We talked about this. Bufo smacked me in the face. Like, but the other ones, they almost kind of just like, it's like a little puppet show. They're like, hey, I'm going to show you this one. And you can decide if you want to look at it. And then like, hey, here's the next one. And you're like, I didn't even know that that was a thing to look at. And then you start looking.
Hmm. And I mean, under these substances, it's pretty magical because the level to which it does allow thought and question to rise top of mind is pretty powerful, but it doesn't mean that it's not possible off of them.
Oh,
Now,
yeah.
this is where the whole other concept of, are we sleepwalking in life in general? And are we allowing time and space to sit in the room in darkness and in stillness and to go inside, or to even just be still long enough to see what is inside come out? I think if we did that, just dead ass sober, we could probably make a lot of progress.
Mhm.
We could probably get to a lot of these questions that we are talking about when under such things as psychedelics, or even in like hypnosis or breath work, or hell, even sometimes in like a cold plunge, just like a change state changes your state more than just physiologically, but mentally and emotionally, because of what it is allowing to be freed up.
Mhm.
And if again, we're going through life doing the same things all the time, like we were saying earlier, you might lead to burnout, but also you're going to be setting yourself up most likely for the same experiences, the same answers, or even lack of answers. If you're not introducing a change state to your mind, your body, your soul, then I think we're missing out on so much potential, and we're
Mhm.
missing out on so much connection, first and foremost to ourself, to
Mhm.
bridge the head and the heart, but then to take that out into the world and to, like I keep saying, is to develop and nurture meaningful relationships.
Mhm. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think the relationship component is so important. And again, I think that that's something that 2020 taught us. It gave us that space where we had to spend more time alone. So we got more in touch with ourselves.
Mm.
And then also it reminded us these people are really fucking important to me. Or I don't
Yeah.
have people, having them is really fucking important to me. And like, even as a hardcore introvert that already worked from home, like did the least, by the end of it, I was like, yo, I need to see a face. Like I need to see a person.
Mm.
And that's also, I think, too, the one of the big, if we were to get esoteric with it, one of the big purposes of psychedelics, and I think saw it was Double Blind make a post about this today, but the singular purpose of psychedelics is not just connection to self. That's a really westernized idea. One of the large purposes of psychedelics, at least in like the opinions of a lot of indigenous cultures, which is where things like psilocybin and stuff come from, is the removal of separation. And so
Mm.
when you
Mm.
get in touch with yourself and you open yourself up more, you see how not separate we are. And you also see how you don't want to be separate. And
Oh yeah.
that's a huge point that I think a lot of people are missing, but that a lot of people want, that they don't realize that they want, are those meaningful, deep relationships where you can talk about anything, where you can process anything together, where you can be your full self and be fully accepted and loved. That's what people want.
These new experiences have, and I think you hit the nail on the head here, have made me realize so many things about myself, such as, for the first time in decades, really understanding who my truest self is, then allowing that truest self to be present as much as he wants every damn day. And that's okay. But not from like the egotistical perspective of, not like the self, I finally know who I am, and now I'm like this boss bitch, watch out world, like I've got it all figured out. But it's the ultimate discovery. And that's, we are an individual in this eternalness that is everyone and everything else. It's, for me, it was this recognition of, there is a self, there is this chase in this river of life, and we are all connected. And the level to which I truly matter is so insignificant and that's okay. But in that insignificant time, that is this physical life, I now have so many more tools and resources and levels of awareness to bring significance and make significance and meaning out of my life for myself, so that the place that I hold in the greater good, in the river of life, contributes to that flow in a much better way. It's this weird dichotomy of, I don't matter, but I do fucking matter. And like, the more that I surrender to both of those, the more both of them rise.
God, that was all, literally, I was just listening to that the whole time, and I was just like, poetry snaps whole time.
You know what I was doing? Like, literally, and it's so wild to have these experiences, because I think it allows me to do just that. Like, I'm literally was putting words to an experience I had in one of my ketamine journeys.
Yeah.
And the last several sessions that I've been doing a lot of ketamine this summer. I've been doing 2 prescribed, medically administered, ketamine is a federally legal drug here in the US. And I've undergone 3 in-person ketamine assisted psychotherapy sessions in clinic, administered intramuscularly. But then this summer, I've gone through 2 different protocols with 2 different companies of at-home ketamine therapy. So Emily and everybody, like, literally every week for about like 10 weeks, I was in the river of life. I was doing ketamine therapy at home on this bed right here behind me. And that whole interpretation I was just sharing was quite literally me, as close as possible, putting words to an ineffable experience of one of the experiences I had of just being literally in the river of life. One of my journeys was it was like this underwater, interstellar kind of just like flow experience. And as much as I would continue to realize about myself and the questions that would arise, it also showed me, like, cool, Chase, that's good for you. Take that out into the world, apply it, integrate it, work on your shit, heal. But remember, you're not that important. But the more important you make your life, the more important life will be. And not just my life, like life for everybody.
Absolutely. And it was, the way you described it was so beautiful, because the vision was so clear. Like, I can literally see the water, and then I see little droplet that is Chase. And it's like, we all have a choice if we want to make that droplet nourishing, clear, mineral rich water, or if we want to make it polluted. That's, and you think about one polluted drop in a river is not going to contaminate the whole river. But your one singular drop could affect X amount of other drops in the river. And at some point, that does affect the whole ecosystem. So it's, again, the whole ecosystem, and just like nature will carry on without us. Like, nature doesn't need us, but it's again, it's that whole duality of everything. It's, my life is, my singular existence does not matter that much to the grand thing. So I can make it matter to me. And in doing it in a way that matters to me, it will have a positive ripple effect, no pun intended with the water analogy, but like positive ripple effect on the greater collective. And that, it's a duality that's really hard to hold. And I think that's where a lot of us get really tripped up. It's either I matter so much or I don't matter at all. It's like complete like self-centricism or like complete nihilism, like nothing matters whatsoever. And it's both. It's that dual. And again, that's really hard to sit with. And if you try and sit with it too much to the point that you find a definitive answer, you're going to drive yourself crazy. But instead, it's like what you said multiple times, you surrender to that lesson and you're like, okay, this is the hand that I'm okay. We'll just do it.
And it's such a duality, like you said. And this is what this type of work and these types of experiences have really solidified for me, and is that we are in a constant state of duality. And I don't say that to put pressure or fear or anxiety on anybody, because that does sound pretty damn anxious. And like actually, what does that mean? But to get these objective perspectives of life is what it's all about. To recognize the duality that is life, that we are the drop of water, but we are also the raging river. And when we tap into our world, our life experience, we are that water drop. It is very meaningful. What we are going through, the flow, the current of life, whether we are chilling in a still pond or a class 5 rapid, that is our perception, and our perception is our reality. But then to be able to tap out of that and to look like, go from water drop to flow to entire body of water to like God's eye view of where that speck of a river is on earth, is the constant duality of life. It doesn't mean either is any less true or more true, less real or more real, because they both exist simultaneously. And it is just a matter of, where are we in the day? Where are we in our life? Where are we in our season of life in terms of relation to, am I the drop or am I the river? And both need to be honored, and both, I think there's a time and a place where we do need to acknowledge, I'm going through a really wild, crazy time. I literally feel like I'm being smashed against the rocks. I am the water drop. But other times, like, to even just, I think, help us go through that even more, just to give us a little solace of like, I'm a part of something bigger and I'm not alone, to give perspective on like, other people have it as bad as me, as worse as me, or other people have it much better than me. Can I lean on them? Who are these other people in this journey with me? Going back to meaningful relationships. This is why it all matters. And there is this constant duality. We both exist simultaneously. And it's just a matter of which one are we going to give more attention to? We need to kind of have this ebb and flow with it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you will meet somebody across every stage of that timeline, and you won't realize it until you've gone through the, water droplet banging against the rock thing. But I had a healer / mentor impart this to me last year when she helped me through like my bufo stuff. She was like, you going through this now and being held in this space and being helped in this way, this is going to be your job one day, because you are going to meet someone that is in a similar place to where you were, and it is your job to continue the cycle of healing. And so it's like, that also helps provide purpose to our pain or the things that we go through. It's like, it's allowed to suck when it sucks, but then you also have the knowledge of, I can use this to help somebody one day. And that is really like, and then when you meet that person, you're like, they're in the shit of it, and you're so excited because you're like, I was you and I can help, and like, I'm here. And they're like, it's the worst thing that's ever happened to me. And you're like, this is amazing. But like, there is so much purpose to it as well. And again, it goes back to that community thing. It's like, we are here to exist together. We're here to exist together. We're here to heal together. We're here to expand together. Like, that's what we're here for. And there's just, none of us asked to be here. Like, our parents just decided like, yo, let's do this thing. Or maybe they didn't. Like, I don't know your life, but none of us decided to be here. So let's make this experience that was offered to us the best that we can while we have it.
Yeah. And I do want to share something, maybe to the listener that is fairly enough, skeptical, devil's advocate, and you should question everything. You should question everything you hear, even if it's from someone like me or Emily that you listen to regularly and you trust already. That's the whole point of what I'm talking about here. It's first and foremost okay to question things. The reality, like the real healing that happened, and I'll kind of like say high level here. The big reason why I went and really made it a regular practice of plant medicine, psychedelics, particularly psychedelic assisted psychotherapy through ketamine, through in home here, literally on that bed, and then in clinic, was I, for the first time in my life, was ready, willing, and able to want to get through the grief of the death of my father. And for the first time ever, consistently, I wanted to get professional help for my diagnosed PTSD around his death. And I'll just say again, high level, I've got a lot of content about this. I'll share with you if you want to post it up.
Yeah, please do.
In those first 3 clinics of with my therapist in the clinic, I got a lot of that. I got to the point of being with him in a way that gave me the final goodbye that I never had before he passed away. But more specifically, back here home, one of the most profound healing experiences I had, which was, again, why it's so important to not only do these things, to go through these experiences, whether that's psychedelic, breath work, journaling, just a change state, but then to have application, to have integration. I went through the experience, quite literally one of these river of life's experience, and I was flowing through and I saw my father. And this was not uncommon for him to visit me or me to visit him in these circumstances. This was like the third or fourth time now. But every time in the past, I had been so adamant on like us being together during this experience. Whereas this time I flew by him and I was like, oh, hey, Dad, like, we'll talk later. It was just like, you're there. I'm here. Cool. I'll get to you. And during the experience, I just didn't make anything of it. But then after, as I was journaling it, I was video logging it. I was talking to my wife about it. And I was just saying everything, because I think in a change state, things happen, or we feel some kind of way during that we don't really recognize the power of in that experience until we can reflect on it later. Mm-hmm. When I said that out loud, when I said, yeah, and then my dead dad was there, the guy that literally gave me meaning for life, and then I have been so torn up about for the last 18 years. I was like, yeah, cool. Like, I'll see you later, Dad. When I said that out loud, something clicked. And it was this sensation that I'm sure a lot of us have of like, if you have loved ones still in your life, amazing, of like, I can just pick up the phone and call them. Like it was no longer this relation of me thinking of my father, remembering that he's dead, remembering that he unfortunately is no longer here with my family, and then not having to remember all the pain and suffering that he went through, because it was as if I was just like, I'll call him later. I knew where he was. I saw him. I was like, Dad, cool. Like, and when I said that out loud, it got me to this level of acceptance in the grief process that I never thought was possible. I never thought I would get to a point, and especially not in medicine work such as this, to where I would believe that it was just as easy as picking up the phone again to talk to my deceased loved one. And like that, I think I just started crying. I broke down, and I was just, this feels so fucking good. And it makes me cry again now, just tapping back into that.
We're all crying. We are all crying.
but this is the beauty of this work. Like now I can cry about it and get emotional, not because of the pain and not because of the anguish that I used to relive all the time, but because of the relief that I had when I said that out loud, and the weight that just left my soul was just, when you're suffering in a way that you think is never going to end, or you don't know how you're ever going to feel better, especially after going through so many different ways to work on it and to treat it. When something like that happens, it's like I got a piece of my life back. And it was just this whole new connection to my father now that I want. I don't want to stay latched on. I don't want to stay stuck in the past. I don't want to only think about him in pain and suffering, and for that to then cause further pain and suffering in my life. So I share this story to let people know how real this type of work can be. Mm-hmm. But more specifically, there is, I think, the necessary kind of preliminary work, and that's the work before the work. Like I said, it had been 17, 18 years, and I had only really regularly begun to work on this grief and this trauma up to that point to where I could fully surrender to this therapy and to the work with my therapist and then the medicine. And in just a matter of a couple sessions, it feels like 17 years later, another 17 years later of healing. And so I say that to share with people that it's very, very real. Mm-hmm. At least my experience.
Wow. First of all, thank you for sharing that. I get whatever room the collective podcast listening is happening in, there's not a dry eye. There's not a dry eye, like not a single one. And I am so deeply happy for you, because that's huge. If you've never experienced any kind of trauma or PTSD, like it runs your life, whether you're when you're aware of it running your life or when you're not. So to have relief from that and to have peace from that, that's one of the greatest gifts. And you are absolutely,
it runs your life and also makes you run away from your life.
Yes. And yeah, it's another one of those weird dualities where you're like, I don't know where I'm going, but I'm trying to get away from something. It's one of the most difficult experiences. So to have that is so beautiful. And I'm so happy for you. That's just, I
got to say something real quick. This is funny timing. If you guys are watching the video, this like moment we started talking about this experience, the heavens themselves opened up and shined down upon a
Literally.
M Dunk's microphone. That is like a disco ball. Wow.
Isn't that insane? Well, I am the disco ball queen. We know this, but
That
yeah.
is, and it's a perfect triangle too.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Like I've been like seeing it in my like the corner of my eye. I'm just like, oh,
Oh,
there it is.
we gotta send this off to somebody to analyze. That's got to have some kind of.
I know a lot of witches. I know quite a few witches. I will send it to every single one of them for interpretation.
I'll send this to my ketamine therapist and be like, oh, also this happened when I was sharing.
This came up. Could you please analyze for me? But
That is
truly,
interesting, huh?
yeah, it is. It truly is. It's the sun. But yeah, it's like it's very interstellar-y, like
That's
that scene where
wild.
the
Yeah.
light is shining through the books. But yeah, that
was also another experience I had. I did a whole podcast episode and it turned it into a YouTube video as well. The second experience I had, real long story short, it was that. I never got to say goodbye to my dad when he was there in the hospital passing away, despite my best efforts. And I had an interstellar moment. Literally, I'm really weirded out right now. I was this giant ball of light, like this just pure white light that my father used to look at in his hospital bed with his eyes. He was completely immobilized his body. Before he passed away, my interstellar moment was him and I were together on that star in that white light, looking down 17, 18 years ago while he was passing away. Like he's literally crossing over. I was with him in this exact pure white light that's happening. It was this interstellar moment that's just mind blowing. This is some wild shit. Damn, man. It could just be literally the sun rotating around, or us moving around the earth, but also what the fuck?
But also duality is both of those things. It is both. Like, yeah. I believe that shit. Like the more like, I don't believe in coincidence. I believe in synchronicity. And so whenever shit like that happens, I'm like, it's like what I was telling you about with the deer during my bufo thing. Like,
yeah, wow.
It's just like that. And like, so I believe it. I'm glad that you and your dad are here in this moment right now.
Oh, I'm so cool that we're having this experience together as well.
I love it. Did we just level up in friendship?
Meaningful. Yeah. Wait, did you just meet my dad?
Did you just
yeah. Say, hey, Chuck, what's up? Yeah.
Hi, Chuck. How's it going? It's nice to have you here. Dude, that's so fucking cool. I'm going to get emotional. Oh, my God.
But like, and this is what I love about just conversations like this and experiences like we're talking about. I mean, it quite literally is just the sun shining down, but quite literally every day in our lives, seemingly insignificant things happen. But what kind of life is that? If we're going to go through life and enjoy it and find or make meaning, it's up to us to do just that and to find and make meaning out of things. And that's the life that I'm after.
100%. And like last year when everything happened with me, there was like a brief period of time when I danced with nihilism a little bit. I think that was important. I think it was important for me to like try and like taste test that and see what it was like. And I was like, that's not in my palate. And for one, it just didn't feel authentic, but two, like you're saying, the experience that we have in life is largely up to us. If we want to have a meaningful experience, we get to create meaning within our experience. And I can almost guarantee you feel the same way. But when I create meaning from a grounded and rooted place, not from like I'm just searching for answers because I don't trust myself or this, that, the other thing. But like when I am making meaning from a rooted and grounded place, my life is so much richer and things just come much more naturally. And there's just this calm about everything. And when you're in these seasons where you're like in a bit of a low, you're kind of in that void space, you also have that trust of like, you know what? It's all gonna work out. It's all gonna work out. I see it all around me. I've been here before. Maybe I didn't see the synchronicities around me before because I wasn't looking for them, but look, I got out of that. What's next?
And that's the coolest part about it all. When you do the work, when you work on yourself, when you make conscious daily choices to work on yourself, you're going to recognize I'm in a high, I'm in a low. But I think the more we work on ourselves, it's not so much like we have more highs. They're still going to be there. And I think they're probably even more enjoyable because we feel some kind of like reward, like for hard work maybe, but also more often than not, we're going to be in more of those lows. or we're going to experience unpleasant things. I think one of the only couple things I think we're guaranteed in life is we're going to be born, we're going to die. And somewhere in the middle, not to sound morbid, is we will experience suffering. Every human will experience suffering. That is a guaranteed thing. So when we have this work on ourselves and we choose to look at our life and look at life through the lens of I am giving it, I am making meaning, even in the down times, the worst times, the suffering, you're going to remember this is momentary. This is going to pass. This too shall pass. And that's just as important for remembering the low, shitty parts of life, but also the highs. And I think that is how we will continue to come back to our center and to maintain and even create our homeostasis in this flow of life, is that this too shall pass. What I am suffering through or what I am enjoying, there's going to come a time when it's done, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Oh my gosh. Oh, we always have great conversations, but man, this one really hit me in the heart. This one was so important.
Oh, good. I'm glad. Me too.
Man, I love this. I love you so much. You are such a
I love you.
And you are so sparkly and effervescent. Thank you for
you took all my sparkles today.
Literally, they joined us on the show. But truly, it's so, and I don't mean to like gender things, but I think it's so important for men to see men like you, men that are existing in their joy and in their playfulness, that also work hard and hold that masculine space, and all of the things that you are embodying your polarities and your totality and your duality. And I think that is so beautiful, and you truly are a role model for all of us out here, but especially the men. Like, we need more Chases leading the charge for the men of the world. And
thank you.
It means so much to have you in my life and to know you in any conceivable way. It's just so fucking cool and such a blessing. And I just love you so much.
I received that. I got nothing but love for you as well. And one last little tidbit I'll say for your audience, especially maybe the guys out there, or, anyone interested in kind of, I think, understanding my preferred kind of, I guess you would call it archetype of masculinity. And it's really, really wild to bring it completely full circle to when I first began my work. The first ever personal development book, the first ever thing I did for myself was I read this book called King, Warrior, Magician, Lover. And it's this, I'm forgetting the author name now, but it's a pretty old book about the 4 types of the male archetypes. And it's these seasons that we go through as a king, warrior, magician, lover. And I didn't really think much of it during. I read it because this guy that I was following on YouTube, shout out Elliot Hulse, promoted it, was talking about it. And then it just, now I'm coming full circle back, and I'm realizing, like, I really do feel like now, as a 37-year-old man, I am stepping into my kingdom, or I'm realizing the kingdom that I have cultivated for the last 37 years, going through all these different seasons as the magician, the warrior, the lover. And it's not to say that like you start and stop one, but it's just the embodiment of all, and like, when is the right time for that version to come out. So, if any of this stuff I've been sharing is of interest and kind of like a really good stepping stone for more work on that, is that book, King, Warrior, Magician, Lover.
Awesome. I'll link that in the show notes. I've heard of those archetypes, but I haven't read the book. So, I mean, I think that's even valuable for women to check out. I love that. Thank you for sharing. And then kind of our last wrap up question. It's a little different since you've been on the show, but okay, cool. I changed it for the relaunch. So, as the namesake of the show implies, EMBody Radio, what is something that you are consciously embodying in the season of your life, or working to embody?
Expansion. And as soon as I said that, it kind of sounds counterproductive, I guess, because when I say embodiment, I think like I'm going to wrap my arms around something, I'm going to hug it, I'm going to absorb it. And expansion for me is the opposite. It's just, letting everything be that is. But I think in a way, it's, again, this whole duality we've been talking about, and that there are so many components to life that seem on opposite sides of the coin, that seem polar opposite, but they really do exist at the same time. And so I can reach my infinite arms in life around the infiniteness that is my life, that is expansion. I would say expansion. I'm just like, it's a surrender, but it's just letting everything that can be because it already is, and just knowing that I'm in flow with that. And so I'm embodying myself as a little water droplet, but also the river of life.
I love it. That's so beautiful. That's so beautiful. This has been a pleasure. This is your opportunity. Plug away. If people want to find you, which I know they will, where can they find you? Where can they listen to you? Where can they consume all of your greatness?
Yeah, come on over. If you're ever in LA, you can probably find me up on Sunset Dialogue Cafe, sipping a cortado, which we got
Cortado.
to do the next time you're in town.
Ah,
Cortado cult out there. But yeah, so my main baby these days is Ever Forward Radio. It's my podcast. All things health, wellness, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual well-being. And then that's like the place where I go for the long format conversations to happen. And then all the in-between snapshots of daily life and wellness and healing and all the things on Instagram at Chase_Chewning.
amazing. Well, you guys, that'll all be linked in the show notes as usual. Chase, thank you so much for coming on and for sharing your heart with us.
Oh, always a pleasure. Thanks, Em.